I just wanted peace in retirement. But my daughter-in-law called and demanded my money. She saw me as an old bank account ready to empty. I smiled and decided to teach her a lesson about greed she'd never forget. What happened that very next Monday shut her up in a way that would make anyone's jaw drop. I'm Evelyn. I'd turned 65 2 weeks prior, and my retirement party had been a small, quiet affair. Just me, my friend Martha, and a slice of decent vanilla cake. I'd worked 38 years as an administrative assistant for a city council in upstate New York, watching those pennies, watching that 401k grow. $300,000. It was mine. Every single cent was stained with coffee and late nights. I was sitting on my porch swing, finally feeling the sun on my face without a deadline hanging over my head, when the phone rang. It was Chelsea. Evelyn, she started, skipping the pleasantries. My daughter-in-law, Chelsea, always had a voice that sounded like she was announcing royalty, even when she was just asking for you to pass the salt. We need to talk about your money. I actually paused, setting my cup down. I could hear my son, David, murmuring something in the background, probably about golf. Not money. But Chelsea was the driver in their marriage, especially when it came to ambition and, clearly, finance. Oh, what about it, dear? I asked, keeping my voice level. The nerve of it, you know? She'd never shown an ounce of interest in my well-being, only what my well-being could provide for her. She let out a dramatic sigh, the kind that lets you know you're the burden, not the solution. Well, you're just sitting on that little nest egg, aren't you? And David and I, have these incredible investment opportunities. Real estate, flipping houses. But we're short. We need about $300,000 to cover the down payments and some outstanding debt. She didn't even flinch. She flat out said, "Your entire life savings would be so much better utilized by us." That was the line. That was the moment. The debt, the investment opportunities. It was all just noise. But the sheer presumption that I, a woman who had worked until my fingers cramped, was just sitting on that money, doing nothing with it, that stung. It was the total lack of respect, the belief that I was disposable now, that I wasn't useful for babysitting or minor repairs, but suddenly useful for a massive cash injection. "You're retired, Evelyn," she pressed, the arrogance thick and syrupy. "You don't need that money anymore. We'll pay you back, of course, with interest. When the properties sell." I thought about the night my late husband, William, and I sat at this very kitchen table, sketching out our retirement dreams, a little cabin by the water, maybe a trip to see the redwoods. William's dreams died with him 10 years ago, but mine hadn't. That money was my lifeline, my independence, my promise to myself that I would never be a burden to anyone. And she wanted to take it to fuel her vanity projects. "Chelsea," I said, and my voice was so calm it startled me. "Let me think about this. It's a big decision. Don't take too long, or the properties will be gone," she chirped, already sounding victorious. I told her I'd call her back. I ended the call, slowly placing the phone back in its cradle. I didn't shout, didn't slam anything. I sat on that swing, and a feeling I hadn't known in decades washed over me. Clarity. They didn't see me. They saw a resource. And resources can be protected. The feeling of betrayal was immense, especially from David. He knew what that money meant. He knew the cost. But he was silent. That silence, I realized, was his agreement. I walked into the house, every step deliberate. I went straight to the hall closet and reached for the high shelf. There was an old, dusty leather box tucked behind winter coats, my memory box. I stopped before opening it, my fingers tracing the scarred leather. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to explain. I certainly wasn't going to apologize for having saved for myself. The plan began right then, and whatever happened, it would be irreversible. The leather box was a time capsule, heavy with receipts and old payroll stubs. When I finally opened it, the smell of aged paper and dried lavender hit me. I picked up a photograph of William and me, barely 20, standing proudly in front of a tiny, beat-up car. He had this gap-toothed grin, and I remembered his promise. "One day, Ev, we'll buy you a convertible." We never did. That convertible money, that extra money we never allowed ourselves to spend, was all pooled here, in that $300,000. I sat there, tracing William's face, and the dam broke just a little. Not in angry tears, but in a quiet, simmering grief over the sheer cost of this life I'd lived. I worked a second job for 7 years, cleaning offices after my main shift. David was in high school then. I'd come home past midnight, smelling faintly of lemon polish, and fall into bed. David would complain the next morning that his sneakers weren't perfectly white for school. He never saw the sacrifice. He only saw the clean shoes. And now his wife, this entitled woman, thinks she can just demand the reward for all those lost hours? The arrogance of youth, or maybe just pure, unadulterated greed. I thought about Chelsea. She's never held a job for more than a year. She calls herself a brand consultant, but it mostly seems to involve scrolling through Instagram and buying things she can't afford. David, bless his heart, is a good man, but weak. He loves her and lets her manage the purse strings, or more accurately, the debit cards. I saw the debt coming years ago. They bought a house they couldn't afford, leased 2 luxury SUVs, and took a cruise every year. All show, no substance. They were constantly dipping into the bank of mom for emergencies, but I always knew those emergencies were self-inflicted. But this time it was different. This wasn't $5,000 for a car repair. This was everything. This was my security. The biggest pain wasn't the theft, but David's complicity. He was quiet on the phone. He didn't interject. He didn't say, "Chelsea, Mom worked too hard for that. We'll figure it out ourselves." His silence was his signature on her request. It was a complete betrayal of everything I thought I'd taught him. William had always told me, "Evelyn, you have to prioritize yourself now. You always put everyone else first." He dreamed that I would take that money and see the world, the places he never could. And here I was, about to lose it all to cover a mortgage payment on a house I wouldn't even be welcome in for Christmas. The realization hit me. If I gave them this money, they would respect me less. They wouldn't see a loving mother. They'd see a fool who could be bled dry. I couldn't teach them the value of the money. I could only teach them the consequence of disrespecting it. I closed the box. The decision solidified into hard, cold resolve. It was time to stop being the victim and start being the architect of my own life again. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of iced tea. I opened my phone and dialed the only number that mattered right now. My financial consultant, George, picked up on the second ring. George had seen me through William's death and had been managing the account for 25 years. He was practically family. "Evelyn, how's retirement treating you?" he asked, his voice cheerful. "It's treating me well, George," I said, my voice firm despite the slight tremor in my hands. "But I need you to do something for me. Something big. I need you to liquidate the entire fund and move it. I need you to set up a new account, a trust, and I need access to be extremely restricted. Immediately." George paused. The silence on the line was heavy. "Evelyn, that's your life. That's a drastic move. Are you sure? Are you paying someone off?" "I'm paying myself off, George," I said, a dry smile touching my lips. "I'm paying off the debt of misplaced love. This is an act of finality." "I'm sure." "All right, Evelyn," he finally conceded, his voice heavy. "It'll be done first thing tomorrow. You're coming into the office." My plan had started. It was going to be irreversible. I felt like I was walking into a war room when I entered George's office the next morning. The air conditioning was set too cold, and I was grateful for the slight shiver it gave me. It helped keep the nerves at bay. George was sitting there, 2 stacks of paperwork on his desk. One for the fund liquidation, the other for the establishment of the new trust. "Evelyn," he said, pushing his glasses up his nose, "I've been working in finance for 40 years. I've seen people do stupid things with money because of love, fear, or even spite. This," he tapped the paperwork, "this is an act of self-preservation. But it will make them very, very angry." "They are already angry, George," I replied, pulling the chair out and sitting down, my spine straight. "They are angry that the money is not already in their hands. All I'm doing is confirming their worst, most self-centered fears." We went over the details. The $300,000 was moved from the easily traceable account to a completely separate, heavily restricted trust that George helped me establish. The documents were complex and thorough. I had to sign so many papers that my hand cramped, but every signature felt like a shield I was raising against their greed. I established that the principal could not be touched for 5 years, except by me, and only with a 30-day written notice. And, crucially, the money was legally designated as non-assignable to third-party debt settlement. No lawyer of theirs could touch it. It was locked down. As I signed the last paper, George looked at me, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. "You're a rock, Evelyn. A real rock." I walked out of that office feeling lighter than air, yet heavy with the knowledge of what was to come. I was no longer the old woman David and Chelsea took for granted. I was a strategist. I was barely in my car when David called. Just as I predicted. "Mom, you're being quiet. Did you talk to George?" David's voice was trying to sound casual, but the underlying tension, the anxiety of a gambler waiting for the dice to roll, was unmistakable. "Yes, honey, I talked to him," I said, driving calmly through the midday traffic. "And? Is it done? Are you sending the money?" I leaned into the vagueness. "David, it's all being sorted out. It's a complicated process, moving that much money. George had a lot of papers for me to sign. A lot of papers to protect it from you," I thought bitterly. "Just be patient. Everything will be resolved by Monday." That was the crucial promise. Monday. I needed them to believe the transfer was coming, to keep them calm and arrogant, glued to their bank account notifications. I needed them to stay in that bubble of easy expectation. He relaxed immediately. "That's great, Mom. You're the best. I knew we could count on you." Chelsea's so excited. She already has the real estate agent lined up. The casual mention of Chelsea's excitement, before the money was even theoretically secure, grated on me. They weren't even pretending it was for David's comfort. It was for Chelsea's investment. "I'm glad you're both happy, David," I said, then quickly cut the call short, citing traffic. I didn't drive home. I drove to the local bus station. I walked up to the counter and bought a one-way bus ticket to Portland, Maine. It wasn't far, but it was far enough. I needed distance. I needed to know they couldn't just show up on my doorstep. I held the flimsy paper ticket, feeling a strange mix of terror and intoxicating freedom. My house was empty, my bank account was safe, and my future was, suddenly and terrifyingly, unwritten. The next day, Tuesday, I went back to my house just for a few hours. I had told David and Chelsea I was doing some yard work, a distraction they would naturally ignore. I needed to finish packing essentials and find a specific deed copy I wanted to keep safe. I was in the guest bedroom, which David and Chelsea had converted into a home office/junk room, rifling through a drawer for the deed, when I saw it, an old, dusty tablet they had apparently forgotten. It was Chelsea's, an older model she'd replaced last year, and it was powered on. My heart hammered against my ribs. I've always been a stickler for privacy, for not crossing lines, but they had already crossed every line I had. They had invaded my financial future. I deserved to know exactly what I was fighting. I picked up the tablet. It didn't even have a passcode. Lazy. Predictable. It was logged into Chelsea's main email. I hesitated for a moment. This felt dirty. But then I remembered the smugness in her voice, the sheer entitlement. I typed Evelyn into the search bar. What flooded the screen was worse than I imagined. It wasn't just simple greed. It was pure malice and contempt. One email to a friend, dated just a week ago. "Can you believe the pathetic old lady is retiring? Finally. It's like she waited until we were at our limit. That money is ours, really. It's David's inheritance. We just need to expedite it. Once we get the transfer, we're booking that trip to Santorini. She can sit home and knit." The word pathetic hit me hard. 38 years of honest work, raising a son who was clearly too weak to defend me, and that's what I was reduced to, a pathetic old lady. I scrolled through more. They were planning the spending down to the last dollar. A new lease for Chelsea's car. Paying off a portion of their massive credit card debt. Not a single mention of an investment opportunity. It was all consumption. They were going to burn through my sacrifice and leave me with nothing but a polite thank you. But then I found the messages with David. David, my own flesh and blood. David to Chelsea, "Are you sure she'll just hand over $300,000? She's tight, Chels." Chelsea to David, "Relax. I told her it was for us in the future. Besides, if she gives us any trouble, we just call Mr. Stevenson, their lawyer. She's old, she'll fold under pressure. We just have to make sure she thinks she promised it. The mention of the lawyer, the threat of a legal battle over money I hadn't even given them yet, was the fire I needed. This wasn't a family squabble anymore. This was a hostile takeover. This was them planning to use the law, their arrogance, and my age against me. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and deleted the history on the tablet, just in case. I wasn't going to show them I knew. I was going to let them stew in their own confidence. The humiliation of their words only served to sharpen my resolve. They thought I was naive enough to fall for a legal bluff. Not anymore, I thought. I looked at the window. The sky was turning a dark, bruised purple. It was time to leave. I had to write the letter that would be my only explanation. It needed to be written with the same firmness with which I signed George's papers. The third and final phase of my plan was about to begin. I left the tablet exactly where I found it, a ticking time bomb of their own carelessness. The writing of the letter was the hardest part. I didn't want it to be a tearful plea or a furious rant. I wanted it to be a surgical strike, precise, final, and undeniable. I chose the finest stationery I owned, the kind William always liked, and picked up a fountain pen. My hand was steady. It was the handwriting of a woman who knew exactly what she was doing. I started without salutation, just diving into the subject. I explained that I knew about the debt and the contempt. I quoted, indirectly, some of Chelsea's more demeaning phrases, but I didn't use her name. I simply wrote about the lack of respect and the self-absorption. I wanted them to know I saw them, truly saw them, for who they were. The critical part was the financial detail. I confirmed that the $300,000 was now gone. Not spent, not lost, but redirected. The money generated by 38 years of sacrifice, I wrote, will now be used to support others who value hard work. The principal has been placed in a restricted trust that funds the William and Evelyn Fund for Women's Retirement Security. Its purpose is to help older women who lack financial literacy to protect their savings from undue influence and manipulation. It was a direct slap in the face. I was using their greed to create a legacy of my own independence. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. I finished by saying that because their need for my money was greater than their need for my presence, I was choosing to remove myself from the equation entirely. The emotional cost of this relationship has exceeded my budget, I concluded. I have chosen peace. I sealed the letter and addressed it to David and Chelsea. I placed it prominently on the kitchen counter, next to a newly printed form from the post office, a change of address form for my mail. A small, cold detail that confirmed the separation. Next, I packed. Just one small, worn duffel bag. Clothes, medication, my late husband's photograph, and the documents George gave me. No jewelry, no unnecessary sentimentality. I needed to move fast. My destination wasn't Portland yet, not officially. It was the home of Martha. Martha and I had been friends since high school. She was a fiery, no-nonsense woman who lived 3 states away, near the coast of Massachusetts. She knew the entire history of David and Chelsea's antics. I called her on my burner phone, a cheap little prepaid thing I'd bought for privacy. Martha, it's me. Can I stay with you for indefinitely? I've just done something irreversible. Martha didn't even ask what it was. Evelyn, honey, you know my door is always open. Bring your slippers and your spine. You're finally putting yourself first, aren't you? I am. I swallowed hard. I need a place to weather the storm. Consider the hurricane shutters up, she said. Just tell me when you get here. The drive was long, the silence in the car oppressive. Every mile I drove away from that house, I felt a toxic weight lifting off my chest, replaced by a jittery mix of anticipation and fear. Fear of their reaction. Fear of the final, shattering confrontation. I stopped at a rest area just outside of Pennsylvania, took a deep breath, and sent the final cryptic message to David. I knew they were planning their big spending spree for Monday. I needed to ensure they would check the mail before the bank account. The text was short, blunt, and designed to sting. Don't bother calling me tomorrow. What I had to give, I've already given. Check the post. I hit send and immediately disabled my main phone. The silence was deafening. I imagined them arguing over the meaning of the message, but I knew they would quickly dismiss it. They were too confident. They believed they had one. I got back in the car, ready for the calm before the brutal storm. I arrived at Martha's house late Saturday night. She lived in a cozy, cluttered little cottage overlooking a harbor, the air smelling of salt and pine. It was the perfect refuge. Martha, bless her heart, had lasagna waiting and immediately poured me a glass of wine. "You look like you've just signed a treaty," she observed, looking at the tightness around my eyes. "Worse," I confessed, pulling my single bag off my shoulder. "I've just signed away my family." We talked late into the night, telling Martha the whole plan. The lawyer, the trust, the scathing letter. Made it real, gave it volume. She nodded, occasionally letting out a satisfied, "Good for you, Ev. It's about time you cut the cord." David's been a spoiled child since he was 30. The quiet of Sunday was almost unbearable. I busied myself helping Martha, trying to distract my mind from the inevitable clock ticking toward Monday. They, meanwhile, were completely unaware. They were still locked in their bubble of entitlement. I knew they were enjoying their last weekend as millionaires-to-be, arguing over granite countertops and which expensive private school they'd switch their kids into. The arrogance was almost palpable through the distance. They were spending the emotional money already, and they hadn't even checked the mail. That's the power of presumption, isn't it? It blinds you. I kept my old phone, the one they still had the number for, powered off. But I watched the prepaid phone, waiting for the first sign of desperation. It came late Sunday night, 11:30 p.m. The prepaid phone rang. It was David. I hesitated, but I answered. I needed to hear the arrogance one last time before I severed the connection entirely. "Mom? What was that cryptic text you sent?" "Check the post. Is it a confirmation letter from George?" He sounded slightly slurred, clearly drinking, celebrating his victory prematurely. "It could be," I said vaguely. "I just wanted to make sure you were ready for Monday." "Oh, we're ready." He laughed, a careless, irritating sound. "We already put down a soft offer on the new property. We just need your money to close." His voice dropped into that manipulative little boy tone he hadn't used since childhood. "Thank you, Mom. We really appreciate this. You know, you're the best. We'll finally be stable, and we owe it all to you. We'll take care of you, promise." He didn't sound grateful. He sounded patronizing. He sounded like he was thanking a particularly useful appliance. "I'm glad to hear that, David," I replied, the lie tasting like ash. "You both deserve exactly what's coming to you." "I knew it," he sighed, relieved. "I knew you wouldn't let us down." "I would never let myself down again, David," I whispered, but he missed the nuance. He hung up, satisfied, probably going back to Chelsea to celebrate their massive windfall. I looked at the clock. Less than 10 hours until the truth hit. I felt sick, terrified, but also strangely peaceful. I had faced my biggest fear, losing my independence, and I had fought back, not with confrontation, but with strategy. I charged the prepaid phone, then turned off the light. I knew that when the sun rose on Monday, the life I'd lived for the past 40 years, as David's mother, as Chelsea's passive benefactor, was going to end, violently and finally. The storm was coming, and I was exactly where I needed to be. Monday morning dawned bright and indifferent. I sat on Martha's porch, watching the fishing boats motor out into the misty harbor. I couldn't eat. I couldn't focus on Martha's cheerful attempts at conversation. I was waiting for the phone to explode. I knew the schedule. David usually checked his bank app around 9 a.m. George had confirmed the transfer would show as pending liquidation at 9:05 a.m., but the actual funds were already gone, locked away. That would confuse them for a few minutes. The real panic, however, would begin after 10 a.m., when they finally read the mail. 9 a.m. Nothing. My hands were shaking. 9:15 a.m. Nothing. They must be checking the bank, seeing the confusing message. They're probably irritated, but still confident. Then, at 10:15 a.m., the first sign of life. A text message notification popped up on the prepaid phone. "David, Mom, what is this George sent? Why is the transfer pending? Call me now." I smiled grimly. Still demanding. Still no politeness. I remained silent. 10:25 a.m. The phone rang David's number. I let it ring. 10:30 a.m. The first text from Chelsea. It was all caps, which I had somehow expected. Chelsea, what did you do to the account? We just checked and the balance is 0. You are lying. George said it was liquidated. This is illegal. You had better call us back right now. I read the texts, feeling nothing but a cool, detached satisfaction. There was no concern for me, no fear for my well-being, only fury over the missing money. Their house of cards was crumbling, and they were blaming the foundation. 10:45 a.m. Another barrage of messages. David, we got the letter. What the hell is the William and Evelyn Fund? Are you sick? Did you give the money to a charity? Are you being defrauded? You need to reverse this. We're losing the property. He still couldn't admit it was my choice. He immediately jumped to me being a victim of fraud, anything but accepting that I had outsmarted them. His mind simply couldn't process that I had the intelligence and the spine to do this deliberately. Then came Chelsea's final, boiling messages, the real, ugly truth pouring out. Chelsea, you selfish old woman. That money was supposed to be ours. You have ruined everything. We are going to lose the house because of your sick joke. You had better have a lawyer, because you promised us that money. David is a mess. You are a pathetic failure as a mother. You will regret this. The level of hatred was astounding. I finally had proof of what they truly felt, unfiltered by their usual facade of polite obligation. They had shown their true colors: entitlement, rage, and a stunning lack of self-awareness. I walked over to Martha, who was watching me with a knowing expression. They got the letter, I said, putting the phone down on the table. They know. I spent the next hour ignoring call after call. They were trying to call a bluff that wasn't there. Then, at noon, the final blow. I received a voice message from Chelsea. I didn't even have to listen to the whole thing. The first second was enough. A high-pitched shriek of pure, agonizing rage. I deleted the message without listening further. I powered off the prepaid phone, then took the battery out, throwing the tiny piece of plastic into the trash. The silence in the room was immense, but inside me, the turmoil had quieted. There was no more fight. There was only peace. They had fired their last shots. Now, I just had to wait for them to realize they were shooting at a ghost. I knew they were in a full-blown panic. The shock of the empty account, followed by the revelation of the letter, would have sent them spiraling. But I want to make sure you understand the lesson I delivered, not just the financial blow. The letter wasn't a suicide note. It was an act of defiance, written in my steady, old-fashioned handwriting. The key message was the fund itself, the William and Evelyn Fund for Women's Retirement Security. I spent a full paragraph describing the fund's mission. It's a genuine nonprofit organization I had George set up, using that $300,000 as the initial principal. The mission is to offer free financial planning, legal advice, and self-defense resources to older single women who are vulnerable to elder financial abuse or familial manipulation. I wrote that the irony was intentional. Every dollar they demanded, every sacrifice they scoffed at, was now actively preventing their exact actions from harming other families. I made it clear that while they saw the money as a vehicle for their greed, I saw it as a tool for justice. The letter continued, explaining my physical absence. I didn't write where I was, just why. I am no longer financially beholden to you, and I refuse to be emotionally beholden to your drama. My retirement is meant to be a time of peace, not a time of financing your chosen lifestyle. I have removed myself to ensure my golden years are filled with comfort, not constant imploring for what is rightfully mine. I also took a subtle shot at David. I included a small, precise figure, the exact amount of money I had loaned them over the last 5 years, with no expectation of repayment. $17,450, I wrote. That was your inheritance, given in small increments. What you demanded this week was simply a sign that the lesson never took. I signed off with my full formal name, Evelyn Margaret Hayes, not Mom or Grandma. It was a business transaction, not a relationship. For the next 2 days, the silence from my old number was deafening, but my prepaid phone exploded. Calls, calls, calls. I ignored them all. I was a rock. Martha kept me grounded, reminding me of the peace I'd finally found. On Wednesday afternoon, the peaceful silence of Martha's living room was shattered not by a phone, but by a car door slamming outside. I looked out the window. It was David. He looked terrible. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair was messy, and his eyes were red and puffy. He'd driven 3 states in a panic. He marched right up to the door and hammered on it. Martha looked at me, her face firm. "You want me to handle this, Ev?" "No," I said, a strange coldness settling in my stomach. "This is my final confrontation. I need to face the full force of his disappointment, not the money, but the loss of the money. Let him in." I braced myself against the wall, preparing for the shouting, the tears, the manipulative plea. Martha opened the door just enough for David to squeeze through. He didn't even look at Martha. All his focus was on me. "Mom, what the hell is this?" he cried, his voice breaking, holding up a crumpled photocopy of the letter. "What have you done to the money? You can't just give away my inheritance." His first thought wasn't my well-being, but the inheritance. I knew this was coming, but hearing it still felt like a physical blow. He wasn't crying for me. He was crying for the lost cash. Then he dropped his voice, leaning in, a desperate, dark look in his eyes. He tried to use his last, most desperate card, the one I had a vague suspicion about. "Mom, you don't understand. I have to get that money back. I have a problem. A real problem. It's worse than the letter. If Chelsea finds out, I'm ruined." He was trying to make me feel responsible, to draw me back into his chaos with a secret I didn't know. The way David looked at me, half sun, half snake, made my stomach turn. He wasn't asking for help. He was offering a trade, the truth for my money. "Ruined by what, David?" I asked, my voice flat. I didn't move from the wall. I needed to maintain the distance. He glanced nervously at Martha, who was standing like a sentinel near the door. "Can we talk alone, please, Mom? This is about an addiction. A gambling debt. I didn't tell Chelsea. I thought I could pay it off with the retirement money before she found out. It's $80,000, Mom. If the wrong people find out, I'm done." A minor viciousness rose up in me. This was the final truth. Not investment opportunities, but shame. "You want me to believe that you and Chelsea demanded my entire life savings to pay off your secret gambling habit?" I pressed, letting the word hang in the air like a disease. "You let her write me off as a pathetic old woman while you were hiding this debt? You used her greed to mask your own weakness." He started to sob, a choked, ugly sound. "It was the only way. She wouldn't understand. Please, Mom, just get the $80,000. Just enough to clear this. I'll stop. I swear." I looked at my son, and for the first time, I saw him not as my baby, but as a man who had made a series of terrible, selfish choices. The disappointment was heavy, but it was no longer surprising. "I will tell you the truth, David," I said, pushing off the wall and walking towards him. "If you had called me 2 weeks ago with humility, with honesty, and asked for help just for the $80,000, I would have liquidated part of the fund and helped you. Because I love you. But you and your wife chose to demand the money, to use manipulation, contempt, and legal threats. You destroyed the foundation of trust. And now the money is sealed. It's for a cause that actually respects the value of hard work." His face went white. The finality of my voice hit him harder than any shouting match. He realized there was no account to empty, no lawyer to scare, and no mother to guilt. "You really did it," he whispered, staring into space. "You left us." I saved myself. I corrected him. "You chose your path, David. I chose mine." He stumbled out the door without another word, defeated and hollow. I was shaking, but Martha wrapped me in a tight hug. "It's done, Ev. You did the right thing." I thought it was done. I thought I had weathered the worst of it. But later that night, a frantic text came through on the old phone, which I had powered on to check for important life updates. It wasn't from David. It was from a frantic, misspelled Chelsea. "Chelsea, David is gone. He took my card. You have to fix this. He said he used the house. I just got a notice. The bank is foreclosing on your house. Did he sign for a second mortgage on your house as collateral? I don't know what he did. If you lose the house, we lose everything. You did this. I froze. My house. My safe place. My last piece of tangible security. David hadn't just used his own debt to manipulate me, he had put my home on the line, likely using some old power of attorney or exploiting a loophole I didn't know about. I felt a wave of icy terror wash over me. I had protected the money, but I had nearly lost the roof over my head. This was his final, most damaging betrayal. The shock from Chelsea's text was crippling, but it didn't last long. Fear turned into a cold, hard focus. I hadn't come this far, hadn't sacrificed my relationship with my son, only to lose the very house William and I had worked for. First thing the next morning, I called George. I didn't bother to sugarcoat it. George, I need you to find out if David used my house for collateral on a personal loan, and I need you to fight it. Now. Within hours, George confirmed the worst. David, leveraging a limited power of attorney I had signed years ago for medical purposes, had managed to secure a massive second mortgage to cover the initial $80,000 gambling debt and additional hidden credit. The bank was moving fast. The foreclosure notice was real. This was the final, critical move of the game. If David and Chelsea thought they were entitled to my money, they certainly expected to inherit the house, a house that was now a ticking debt time bomb. I had to act fast and definitively. George, I said, I want to sell the house. Evelyn, you just retired. Where will you live? He protested. I need to liquidate the asset before they steal it entirely. Find a buyer immediately. Someone willing to move fast. And that's what I did. I didn't sell it for a huge profit. I sold it to a local real estate investment group who specialized in quick, discreet transactions. Crucially, I negotiated one condition: a long-term lease on the small, detached cottage in the backyard. I secured my future living situation before I signed away the property. The entire process took less than 2 weeks. I never went back to the house. George handled all the paperwork. The proceeds from the sale, after paying off the predatory second mortgage David had taken out, were minimal, but they were clean. They were mine. The final paperwork was signed on a Friday. On Monday, David and Chelsea were served with the official notice. The property at 426 Maple Street was sold. The house, their supposed inheritance, was gone. I didn't call them. I didn't write another letter. I simply funded my small, clean profit into a new checking account, bought a tiny plot of land Martha knew about, right on the coast near the water, just as William had dreamed, and started having a tiny prefabricated cabin installed. I finally sent them one last email, a short final notice of my permanent new address, followed by a message. There is nothing left here for you. Find your own way. I settled into my tiny, perfect cabin just 3 weeks later. The air here is salty. The sunsets are incredible, and the biggest noise I hear is the sound of the gulls. I have my quiet, my books, and the certainty that I am completely, utterly safe. David and Chelsea called the police, George's office, and finally my old number, only to find the line disconnected. I heard through Martha that they are now living in a tiny, crowded apartment, struggling to manage the debt, and blaming me, of course, for all of it. They lost the money. They lost the inheritance, and most importantly, they lost the easy target. I didn't win a big, public battle. I didn't shout my triumph. My victory was silent, strategic, and final. I sit here now looking at the ocean, and I confess to you, the day I decided to choose my own peace over their selfish demands, that was the day I finally started living. That day, I taught them the value of my sacrifice by ensuring they would never touch it again, and I have never looked back. I am free.